Catch Wrestling Alliance, where we help you to wrestle better, and together we keep real wrestling alive. Thank you very much for listening or watching. Of course, we're like on Twitch and YouTube and all kinds of podcast platforms. So, welcome. Thank you. First things first, next week at UCLA, the university here in Los Angeles, we our classes will be starting. The winter break is over and classes will begin on Monday. But if you're in the Los Angeles area, you don't have access to the university gym, you can train with us at Fight Science MMA. That's located in the middle part of Los Angeles, so it should be pretty easy to find. So that's Fight Science MMA on Thursday nights. Also, if you're not in the area and you still want to train with us, you can totally train with us online on our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com. And then one more thing, if you're really good, you know something very well and you want to teach it, you can also use the website platform that we use called Kajabi. There's like a 30-day trial link in the description box. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get to the topic at hand. So does catch wrestling even work? Like the easy answer, the simple answer is yes. But there's kind of, I want to try to take like a different perspective or a different route to this understanding, where it's like you might have critics say that, oh, these catch wrestling techniques don't work, and actually I might even say that some of them don't work because but for a different reason, right? So let's try to go step by step, and actually I'll start with something that are a few instances that happened yesterday and overnight. So started off with training. So I trained yesterday at 10th Planet headquarters. Eddie Bravo was the instructor, and he often says things that I think are thought-provoking, and I think what he said really pertains to not just like 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, but it pertains to catch wrestling or even Chinese kickboxing, Sanda. So anything that's not like the mainstream way of doing things. And Eddie was saying something along the lines, like, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting him verbatim, but he was talking about some of the techniques that he likes, that actually many of them are kind of wrestling oriented. And he was saying that a lot of people might say they don't work ultimately because they're not practicing them. They're not trying to use them, right? They're doing a lot of the mainstream things. So whatever technique you're trying to use, you're eventually going to get good at it because of repetition. Even if you fail many times, if that's kind of part of getting a technique into your repertoire, right? You're into your bag of tricks, right? It is that whole idea of using it and failing with it, and then eventually you understand it better. You understand when to use it. I think there was like a video, I think just this morning, that I saw from one of the best American freestyle wrestlers, Helen Maroulis, was talking about when she first started wrestling, she didn't understand the distance and the timing for doing a double leg takedown, and but it's reps, right? So Eddie Bravo was saying something along those lines, where it's like, yeah, people probably don't even or they might see some like 10th Planet technique that seems strange, and so then they're just going to assume like, oh, it doesn't work, or it's not for many people or whatever. But a lot of it is just trying to learn it or trying to incorporate it into your style, right? So a lot of people are just doing kind of like what's considered like mainstream jujitsu, or in the case of wrestling, the people are just doing mainstream amateur wrestling, like what you would see in freestyle, or in the United States, you'll see it in our collegiate wrestling styles. And then if anything kind of deviates from kind of like the standard mainstream version, then a lot of people will think that they'll get like this whole cognitive dissonance thing, where in their mind they're like, this is not what everyone's doing, so it must not work. If it worked, then everyone would be doing it. And in a way, too, you see that. Actually, this is an argument that I've seen a lot, even in medicine with doctors, where they're like, "Oh, if something really worked, then everyone would, or it would be every doctor would be using this treatment." But what we see time and again is that um, many things that are beneficial, say like different foods and whatnot, there isn't as much research into some things that can't be uh, like monetized or something can't be patented, right? So you're going to be seeing reasons why the mainstream is how it is. And this is like I kind of gave the medical example just so that you can see that it's in all fields. It's not just in jujitsu. It's not just in kickboxing or wrestling or whatever. So um, I guess my point to you then would be, especially if you're like a fan of catch wrestling, that yeah, a lot of it is trying to use the techniques that we do, like trying to work that double wrist lock, trying to maintain the grip, and also trying to roll with it if someone's countering you, and knowing when to give up, even, or knowing when to try it, when to try a variation, when to try to roll through. Well, like I guess I can't really give you like an example right here because I don't have the map. We're not on the map, but I think you get the picture where it's like, even though you might hear something where someone might say like, "Oh, whatever catch wrestling technique it doesn't work," right? Well, most of the time, it is something that is really based in wrestling. So it's like it's definitely something that has worked or that has developed because it does work. It has a purpose, right? Has a function, like a lot of times we have a lot of toe holds in catch wrestling. A lot of it is to give someone pain so that they roll over face up, right? So a lot of times it isn't necessarily all about the submission hold, but there's a reason why these techniques were there. They're practical, they work. So when someone who doesn't do them, who doesn't practice them, who doesn't understand them, they if they say it doesn't work, it is just that. It's like they're not doing it. They don't understand it. So of course, if they were to even try, they'll probably fail at doing it. So that's the gist of it. Earlier, I mentioned that for catch wrestling, I do think, unfortunately, I personally would even say that not everything works, but that's only because in the early days, once catch wrestling was becoming more what we call worked, right, and it was evolving, or the mainstream was evolving into the professional wrestling realm, then yeah, a lot of things were called show holds. So it wasn't necessarily designed to be a real submission, but they were designed to look painful and to play it up to the crowd so they can kind of understand what's going on. It's theatrics, right? So some people are teaching show holds and passing that off as being realistic catch wrestling. So for those instances, then I would say, oh yeah, that doesn't really work. But even with that being said, I mean, it has like some kind of grain of real technique in there, right? So like even today, you're seeing in WWE, you're seeing more like submission stuff, like people attempting these arm bars and stuff, and so uh, that's kind of showing that these techniques have a real grain of truth. And a lot of times when I work with pro wrestlers, like the techniques they do, yeah, totally, you can totally see the real wrestling root in what they do. Um, so it's not to say that whatever they do doesn't work. It's just has to be understood and kind of like almost translated a little bit to the practical version the real wrestling version. Um, so in a way, you can't even say that what they do doesn't really work, because you can see the, if you're very familiar with wrestling, and in a way, I want to kind of maybe it'll offend people who do amateur wrestling, because I've seen so many amateur wrestling people who are, really good at it. They'll not be able to see the obvious, like, root of the technique, which I think is really bizarre. You get some people who are just like so uh like they're so blinded, where it's like things have to be done as one specific way, and if anything deviates, then it's not it. That's not right. That's not whatever. And but then these people are still the ones that aren't going to be able to help, like, see. They're not going to be able to see, like, the roots of, say, like a catch wrestling technique, being more cognizant of the potential of submission holds or double wrist locks and stuff. They're not going to understand that. They're not going to see that as wrestling, because for some reason their brain is just too rigid, and they're just thinking like, oh, wrestling is this. And unfortunately, like nowadays, like in mainstream grappling, you're seeing people think that like wrestling is just takedowns, and it's like it's unfortunate that because there's way more to wrestling than takedowns. And it's like, have you ever seen a wrestling match, like, especially like freestyle and our American folk style? It's like the match continues on the ground. I don't know why you think that it ends right at the takedown. It keeps going. So uh, it's kind of like the main idea. And also, to one other thing that happened, that just happened this morning, or I noticed it this morning, which I think can add to this conversation, is, so at UCLA we did some promotional seminars, so the students could see like all the different types of classes that we offer, because UCLA offers like a wide variety of martial arts. So we have all kinds of classes. So like Japanese sword fighting, the Filipino stick fighting. We have different styles of kickboxing, boxing. Of course, the Chinese kickboxing that I teach. Um, so we did a seminar where, so say like Chinese kickboxing, I think is another good example, because Chinese kickboxing, or Sanda, is not the mainstream, or like, especially in the United States. We, like, people might know boxing and they might know Muay Thai, and that's it. So anything that deviates from like boxing or Muay Thai, they don't have any clue of, like, or they think Muay Thai has a lot of takedowns, but compared to Sanda kickboxing, Sanda has a vast, way more takedowns. It's more wrestling oriented as a style compared to Muay Thai. So what happened was is there are very common takedown techniques that are used in Chinese kickboxing that you'll see people around the world using. So when people around the world are doing it, it doesn't mean that it is rare. But say like someone in the United States who doesn't have as much exposure to all these different styles, they might see like a Sanda takedown, and since it's like in a kickboxing, like it's in a kickboxing look, right? People are standing up, they're throwing punches and kicks, and then one person getting taken down in a way that's not like a Muay Thai uh, foot sweep or something. Then people are like, "Oh, I don't know if that's practical," but it's like, well, everyone who's doing Sanda around the world is doing it, and it's effective. So then it is practical. Um, So I guess I want to encourage people who might like these techniques or like these styles, like catch wrestling or other styles that aren't the mainstream. Just know that the techniques, they work, right? And a lot of times it's for people who say it doesn't work. Yeah, I've personally seen kind of two camps where either the person who's kind of negative, they're usually closer to being a beginner than anything. So it's kind of like that whole Dunning-Kruger effect where the person who knows the least is the most confident about their ignorance, right? Or if it's someone who has a lot of experience, then they just, like how Eddie Bravo was saying, it's like they just don't practice this thing. They don't know how these techniques work. They don't try them because every technique has a counter, or people can be fighting you. So in order for you to understand a technique very well, it takes that trial and error period. So even how like Eddie Bravos often says, like you gotta get submitted trying to do the technique many times, and then when you stop getting submitted, that's like the next stage where it's like you've understood it well enough where you can defend yourself while you're trying to do a technique, and then the next step is actually just being able to pull it off and get the advantage over your opponent in a match, or whether it's sparring and then eventually then competition. So that's ultimately the way things go. But I think those of us, I like, if you're into catch wrestling in particular, we're not the mainstream grappling style. So those of you who are fans, just, I think you've already experienced people say like, "Oh, that doesn't work," or that's not practical or whatever. But you can still submit people or control people, or you can pass people's guards like nothing, which is a big big achievement. So I mean, these things work ultimately. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you. Let me know if you have any comments. Feel free to comment, even talk about your experiences or ask any questions. Because that's ultimately been my experience. I've been doing martial arts for a couple decades. So I've seen these things, or I've been around like so many people who are like, oh, I don't know if this would work, but then I've been able to do the techniques on them, or say like at 10th Planet headquarters. One classmate that I really like tells me that some other people they talk about me as not in a bad way, but they talk about the techniques that I do, and it's like stuff to be on the lookout for, because it's not what everyone else is doing. So they talk about me in a positive way. We're all friends. So, but one of my classmates told me that, like, they let me know. And so, but even also too, I think I mentioned this in an earlier podcast. One of the instructors, his name was Danny, really cool guy, really great black belt, and he was talking about how, like, how when the studies come out, it's not necessarily a study, but it's like when the statistics come out about the most common submissions in MMA, or even in nogi or jiu-jitsu competitions, how you still have, say, like, rear naked choke at the top, you still have arm bars, and then the other submissions afterwards, so like kimuras and all these other ones. So it's still like kind of like the standard ones are happening the majority of the time, with rear naked choke being at the very top. But Danny was saying, he was telling me that, uh, having seen me spar several times, that I've been able to make the double wrist lock or the kimura be very high percentage submission. But it goes back to the point that Eddie was talking about, that I mentioned at the beginning, where it's like, if you're using the technique over and over, you get to the point where you'll know better how to roll with it, depending on how someone's defending, and then you can make it work, right? But these things take time. So if you're a fan of catch wrestling and you want to do a lot of the, like, quintessential catch wrestling techniques, yeah, it'll take time, and nothing happens like just in one weekend or just overnight, right? It's really about, like, putting in that mat time, getting like failing at the technique. I think that's the one of the things that people really need to know, that it's like you kind of have to, or no one's going to be super great the first day, and especially when you are first learning, you got to kind of focus on principles so that you can apply them in different scenarios. Also, techniques, you have to be failing at them over and over, or also, like I mentioned, the principles, you got to be trying to employ those principles in your roles so that you can find out better how they work, how you have to position your body, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like there's so many like literally there's so many moving parts, like your body, then also your opponent's body, and like how they're going to try to attack you and counter you. So these things really take time. So in a way, going to the whole idea of the belt system, not so much about the belt system in jiu-jitsu, but the time, right? So what they say, like on average, it's like a 10-year journey to get your black belt in jiu-jitsu, or somewhere around that time, right? Except some famous rich people that can do it really quickly. But um, that in a way makes me feel like it is, um, it's definitely like more valid in a way, because like you see, say with catch wrestling, you see people who uh they'll think they've learned catch wrestling like just so quickly, right? They're already a master, and over the weekend, or just a few classes or something. But I think that's that whole Dunning-Kruger effect, where they might know a little bit, they've seen a little bit, so then they feel like they know so much, so they're an expert, right? But uh, that's what they always say about that whole Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's like the real expert usually questions themselves more than the ignorant person, because they've learned so much that they know that it's just truly scratching the surface. So that's why I'm kind of I really, I guess I feel like I agree more with the whole jujitsu system, not necessarily like the black belt idea, but I mean, like the different belt system, where it's like, the different stages. I think that's totally fine, but the whole idea of uh like taking that much time, like the taking the many years to recognize you as a real expert, right? Because we're seeing in styles that are not as popular, like catch wrestling, we're seeing people who haven't done it very much at all claiming to be real experts. So um, that's an unfortunate thing. So I think that's why sometimes or that's why earlier I mentioned that like some people are teaching show holds and passing that off as catch wrestling. So um, if you know how to take a show hold and show the root technique, like the real catch wrestling aspect, then that's something different. But um, yeah, so in a way, like my whole beginning was about like, if someone says something doesn't work, if someone tries to claim that a legitimate technique doesn't work, then they're just wrong, right? But in catch wrestling, since we have that connection with pro wrestling, and some people are kind of mixing in some of the pro wrestling techniques and passing them off as like legit catch wrestling techniques, then you have a little bit of a problem with your students who probably never getting these techniques in a role. But maybe if they practice, like I said earlier, if they practice it all the time, maybe they'll find a way. But I'll that some of those show holds, I'll really doubt that someone would get on someone who's like their same skill level or higher in like a catch wrestling match, let alone a nogi submission wrestling match or something. So um, barring that one kind of little exception, then ultimately it's really about like that time and putting in the like getting all those fails through your system so that you can like finally learn and understand the technique. All right. We got we got someone who I have no clue who this person is at all. Not just kidding. I got Henry. Um, so what does Henry have to say? Most catch wrestling instructors outside of you and a handful of people have never wrestled a round under catch wrestling rules in their life. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So it no, it's so true. So with that being said, you'll have a lot of people who are in that boat that Henry mentioned, and they'll claim to be a catch wrestling master or to know catch wrestling, just because they think like they learned a double leg takedown and they know jujitsu or some jujitsu submissions. So then, oh well, that's all of catch wrestling, right? It's just this mix. It's just a rule set or whatever. It's a they think that, or that's their reasoning. But catch wrestling is its own thing, and it has um, like its own way of doing things. Like I think I've used the analogy of different cuisines, right, over the time, because I think that's real. That really helps you to understand it very well. Where it's like Mexican food as Mexican food, and you know that it is not Chinese food, right? You know there's not French food. They have their own ways of doing things, their own way of like putting ingredients together and whatnot. So same thing with catch wrestling, and going back to different techniques, right? It's like you totally have to use a technique. And actually, I don't know if you're still there, Henry, but actually, hope you don't mind. I'll mention what you said actually last night, where you learned. So Henry has he's in a bunch of our videos, right? He's in a bunch of the shorts that we put up. He's been training with me for many years, and he was telling me just last night that he's been able to use one of our quintessential catch wrestling techniques um, on many people, right? And you can add more details if you're still there, um, but it's like it's become one of these things that, like Henry said, I'm paraphrasing Henry from last night, but he was saying something where it's like because he's been doing these techniques and they're not like the orthodox techniques, and a lot of people, it's not like everyone is training with me. So when Henry's going up against other people who kind of are doing like the orthodox stuff in jujitsu, Henry's able to use a lot of these mat wrestling techniques, and he's been able to like get on top. If he's underneath, he's able to get on top. He's able to reverse a lot of positions. So these things work, but because not everyone knows them, it's not mainstream, then people might say like, "Oh, that doesn't work." And one of the techniques we mentioned specifically, we have a video on it on our YouTube channel. I call it the far elbow technique. I think we have like a special like intro. If you were to go to our YouTube channel, I believe I made a playlist where it says start here. I think that technique is in that start here playlist. So if you want to go check it out, it was like so effective. And personally, like adding on to what Henry said, is that um, I've had people say that that technique doesn't work, and then when I roll with them, and of course they're not beginners, I'm able to get techniques. I'm able to get the technique on them. Doesn't matter what belt they are. It works. And so um, it's just going back to the whole idea of putting in the time. So maybe if I was a beginner and I didn't know the techniques as well as I do now, then yeah, totally I might not be able to get them. But still, yeah, I've put in a lot of the time, and I really try to use these techniques, really try to show the effectiveness of them. And so yeah, I'll usually, the vast majority of the time, be able to make these work. All right. And to the point of, say, like last year I did I won the Pan American Championship, basically using all catch wrestling techniques. You're getting some double wrist lock submissions and stuff, and never really ever being on my back. So, these things can work even in no-gi competition. But yeah, just put in that time, get those miles in there, and you will be able to use them. So if someone says they don't work, it's just because they don't they don't actually put the time in to learn how to make them work. Right. So especially with catch wrestling, a lot of the techniques are very straightforward. It doesn't take too many steps to get into a lot of these positions. So they're more fail safe than a lot of other techniques that might take, several steps to enter. So that's what makes them really effective and really good. So with that being said, thank you for commenting, Henry. Also, if you want to train with with Henry and myself and the rest of the crew at Fight Science, we're there every Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Also, UCLA classes start next week. Also, you can train with us online, catchwrestlingalliance.com. On our website, we also have several one-off courses. So if you want to just uh, if you want to just see those, you could totally do that. You don't have to join our membership. Totally fine. Also, it's the beginning of the year, so you can also let us know what you'd like us to focus on. I kind of have some ideas. I've been submitting people with an Americana version that I really like. That's also unorthodox. I've been getting it on a lot of like upper belts and stuff. So I was thinking about maybe doing a video about that one. I'll say like my current favorite submission. But then, let us know if there's any other topics that you'd like us to talk about. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. We're here to help you to wrestle better so that together we keep real wrestling alive. See you next time.